All right. So I guess I'll start with just a brief introduction. You heard my name and title, and I'm a resident here in Dallas and excited to be with you for the next 30 minutes or so. Just to give you a little bit more texture to what U.S. commercial industries means, and my remit within Microsoft is that the field organization that work with many of you out there from a sales and pre-sales capacity all the way through delivery and ongoing success to drive the value and outcomes that you're looking for, specifically around industries. And we oriented ourselves around that because we felt like that was exactly where AI taps in the most. And so I cover the retail, consumer goods, financial services, manufacturing, and healthcare and life sciences industries at this right now. I think it's a unique time, and I'll start maybe with just some, not to make this a Microsoft commercial, but some framing that we tend to rely on as we talk to business leaders, both in IT and the lines of business, about how to think about AI. And of course, many of you, and you've heard from many thought leaders over the course of yesterday and this morning, probably put a similar framework around it. But we think about, first, empowering and enriching the employee experience. And as that matures, you think about getting closer to your customers, deepening the relationship, mostly through data and insights with AI, enriching models that maybe have existed, and thinking about how you can better serve those customers and create more value to your end customer. Then, of course, agents, which I think you heard a little bit about in the last session, that sits with business process optimization, and that's really taking off right now, and we're pleased to be a major partner in that sense. And then that ultimately hits the human ambition with bending the innovation curve, because ultimately, once you get this foundation or this AI platform set, then it's really, okay, now that's where the human intervention comes in, and then you really start to take off. And we're seeing that in the early adopters and the communities that are thinking about that. So that's more or less the way we come to our customer base, and they think about industry wrapped around all of that. However, what we find oftentimes is that customers are thinking about AI around knowledge workers and productivity gains. And that's absolutely great. And Microsoft has played in that space for decades, and we're happy to continue to work on that. But I think the miss right now is the emphasis and prioritization around AI and the physical landscape, the unlocking of the frontline worker potential, and unlocking the capability of managing equipment and data around that. And I can't think of anybody who's better equipped to have a conversation about AI in the physical world than Josh, who will introduce himself in a minute as the CEO of Willow. We've worked together extensively over the past 2 years in many environments and across many industries. And I think you'll be energized by the story he can tell about the value that he's creating with his customer base and the partnership that we have together. So, Josh, over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good to be here today, and thank you to the DRC for putting this amazing event on. You probably detect in my accent that I'm not from Dallas and not from the United States, but happy to call Dallas home. I moved here 4 years ago with my family. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Started Willow in our home in Sydney nearly 14 years ago, and moved to the United States to pursue the growth of the company. One of the reasons for moving here was because of the amazing partnership that we built out with Microsoft, but also specifically in Dallas because of the number of Fortune 100 and 500 companies that are headquartered here and the significant presence that many others have in this local market. So as Carlton described, we've been very focused on the operations side of an enterprise. Initially, we looked at what we call a digital twin, so bringing together traditional silos of data or sequestered data sets that had never been brought together before. So think of the spatial context of this building we're sitting in right now. Most of the time it's sitting on a 2D plan that might have been printed off at the end of construction that sits in a basement or rolled up in a corner. That's the spatial context. All the equipment that's in this room has a manual, has a warranty, has work tickets that need to be fixed. They sit in different databases as well. And then you've got live data systems, so anything that has telemetry on it, whether it's an occupancy sensor, whether it's a sensor that detects people coming into a space, or a CCTV camera, or the heating and cooling system in this space here, has live data. Now, those data sets are usually sitting in the equipment manufacturer's database, and the owner or the operator of this building or many other buildings has very little visibility into that. So we started the company in bringing these data sets together. The first move was, how do we move away from silos, ring binders, whiteboards, analog basically, and move into a digital frame, so digital twin. What's been incredible, and the partnership with Microsoft has been a big part of how you build a knowledge graph and how you build a twin. But in the last sort of 36 months, I'd say, maybe even earlier than that, 24 months, it's been amazing to see the unlock of opportunities, as you mentioned, Carlton, on the front line. Workers out at DFW Airport or in Walmart stores that just didn't have access to these data sets, and more importantly, couldn't query anything, had to, I call them the human twins, they had to be 40 years experienced in that particular domain, or have a lot of apprenticeship time with another experienced person to hand down that knowledge, a bit like a cottage industry. That's shifted very quickly to being able to query a model and get precision answers. So very exciting time to be on the operational side of things. I think that we're in for a number of interesting changes in the way in which the front line will adopt this technology, and indeed the way in which productivity, energy consumption, and the use of these various different assets will be encountered over the coming years.
Yeah, so I think what is fascinating about this, and what I like about what Willow does, trust me, I have a lot of conversations, as many of you are probably evaluating what productivity gains mean in terms of value or ROI for, let's just use our product, Copilot. But what I love about this the use cases that we've partnered together on, is it's so easy to point specifically to hard dollar savings and the ROI and rapid time to value that some of these solutions can bring. So Josh, maybe walk through a couple of use cases, and then we can talk about how you dive into that ROI and what you're seeing, because I think that's on the minds of most every IT and business leader out there is, okay, AI seems great, it's a good idea, but where does it hit the bottom line?
I can't see everybody in the audience, but raise your hand if you've been through DFW Airport.
Well, I think that's probably everybody, right?
Yeah. Well, at DFW Airport, you might not know this, it's the size of Manhattan in terms of land mass. It's the second busiest airport in the United States and the third busiest in the world. And it's experienced incredible growth, like we've all seen here in North Dallas over the last few years, in the number of passengers that that go through the airport on an annual basis. It's sitting around about 87 million passengers, only second to Atlanta. With that growth, huge capacity constraints. We all see the challenges that it has with being able to construct new Terminal C, and we're seeing a new Terminal F being built. So construction zone, plus constraints around bridges. I won't ask for a show of hands on how many of you landed early or late, and that horrible moment we all experience, oh, the jet bridge is occupied, you have to wait a few minutes, and that could turn into a lot longer. Well, it's not always because of busyness that those jet bridges are occupied when you really want to get home and see your kids. It's usually because of maintenance issues or issues that we don't usually see. Every one of those jet bridges has hydraulic systems on them. They've got heating and cooling systems on them. They've got ground power units that are supposed to be used by the airlines when it comes to putting cold air or hot air into the plane while it's on the bridge, rather than using the gas. So they're simple things to walk through, but there's stuff around them. And so for DFW to really embrace this increase in passengers, the jet bridges are a huge consideration. And to your point, Carlton, it's not just about the AI for the knowledge worker. In this particular instance, how do we enable a frontline worker to understand what the root cause problem could be on this jet bridge, and importantly, not react to a problem, but predict the problem might occur. And so what that involves is being able to look at all the systems that are on those jet bridges and the issue could be, if a heating or cooling issue, it could be coming from the central energy plant. But traditionally, you go and look at this problem, try and fix it. Oh, whoops, we've got an issue. But it's actually right back in the central energy plant where there's a problem with one of the compressor valves. And so with the technology that we now can deploy, by bringing all this into a data estate, you can overlay those important telemetry sets, a bit like a doctor would look at a break or a fracture in your leg before they operate, and looking at where the root cause of this problem would be, and then being able to diagnose it and then do something about it. Really where it's getting super exciting is you can start to look at AI in the hands of a frontline worker. So previously you might get a maintenance call, this is too hot, this is too cold, the hydraulics aren't working, or there's something wrong with this jet bridge. Pretty non-detailed. And someone goes out to fix it, they do the best they can, and they might have fixed it for half an hour or an hour, but then it breaks again. And so being able to query, question, who fixed this last? What was the problem? What parts did they take? And so what's happening with Copilot is it's searching all of the different maintenance calls that have happened on that jet bridge. It's searching for all of the live data systems, because we're tapping in. It doesn't matter what system it is, what proprietary system it is, we can look into that. And then importantly, the manuals, these hidden documents that used to sit on a shelf in a ring binder that are sitting within a large language model. These things are 200 pages long, sometimes thousands of pages long. And so what can happen here is someone can ask a question. Oh, I've got this error code 156 on this compressor pump. What does this mean? And it will give you a precision answer, a citation of the page, the reference, and then do you want to look at the fix on this? Yes, who fixed this last? What parts did they take, even before they go? This is transforming operations. And to answer your question about ROI, the focus for DFW, and I'll use that as an example as we're all here in Dallas, DFW put together a financial plan using the technology that we've been able to deploy over at the airport, across the entire airport, and actually baked into their forward-looking maintenance costs a 25% reduction per annum over a 10-year period. And this is serious amount of saving, going from reactive to predictive. Now, what I loved about that is it was an aspirational goal to begin with. Let's put a North Star out there. Let's have a big, hairy, audacious goal to go to 25% reduction. Well, after year one, I felt like, okay, that's more than achievable. And so what they're saying, we want to get to 30%. So maintenance is a key area, but maintenance is about people. And maintenance today is about people in yellow vests and hard hats going out and fixing problems so that passengers can get a better experience. But that's only one of them. I think if I was to add a couple of more, energy utility costs are only rising. I was speaking to a CEO of a health system yesterday, and they said they get extra $1.6 million a year on one precinct that they have in Georgia from last year in terms of utility costs. This is a huge issue for many operators of hospitals and schools and universities and airports and so on. And so being able to look at ways in which to save costs in terms of consumption of energy. I'll give you an interesting example. So in a higher education setting, looking at spaces, and traditionally if you've got an occupancy sensor in a space, it could come from a Cisco system, or you could look at some kind of sensor you put into the room, how many people are in this space. And this data sits in a different database. And then you've got your heating and cooling system that sits in another database. And so just by overlaying these two data sets and creating an insight, which then creates an action, we can say, okay, why have you got hot air or cold air getting pushed into these spaces in the library when nobody's there? Why don't you turn this space off? And we're seeing a 7 to 9% just in energy consumption just by looking at two data sets. This sounds so simple, but it's very profound, because we're not seeing these types of insights because the data has been sitting in different types of estates. On utilities, many of these campuses have large pipelines of either water or gas or other, and going back to DFW Airport, because it's such a huge landmass, a water leak can be very expensive. In fact, it can be catastrophic. And a lot of the time, if you don't have data on pressure and other things, and you don't have an insight on a map and it's connected up to different systems, you cannot see until something's happened, a sinkhole or we've got a huge leak in a space. And so again, by seeing this in advance and identifying the issue and knowing where that issue is on the pipeline, going out there and fixing it with precision rather than no precision at all and reaction is a huge area of savings. So there's two examples, there's lots more.
No, I mean, it's perfect. I like it because predictive maintenance is creating savings on avoiding an issue, but also resolving it quickly when it does happen.
Right.
And 25%, that's amazing in terms of ROI, and the energy costs at 7 to 9% are hard dollars. You referenced in both those use cases a couple of times the data layer. How do you approach that, and how do you think about, and what is your sort of suggested path forward? I'm sure it's on everyone's mind because data is at the heart of AI. Without the data, without the connection to the data, without the merging of the data from perhaps multiple data lakes, like what are your thoughts around that? And let's talk a little more about that.
Well, I've got more experience in the OT world, so the operational technology space, and then in the traditional space where Microsoft's played in the IT world. But I would say that, first of all, without a great data estate, the opportunity for query and for prediction and for real unlock for your operators, your frontline workers, is limited. So the question then is, how hard is it? How do you overcome that problem of sequestered data and of data that's sitting in silos? Well, first of all, I would say starting with the human sort of leadership issue, seeing this as a problem and a challenge. I'll use a CEO who's just finished his tenure, new CEO at DFW, the previous CEO, Sean Donoghue, looking at the business issue first and saying, we're going from 65 million passengers to over 85 million passengers in a very short amount of time. We have to solve this from the ground up. We know that we've got data issues, let's solve it. And so looking at that from that sort of top-down approach, I think was huge, and saying, okay, let's look at this in a new way. So that I'd say, number one, culture and leadership. Number two, look at the unified data estate. Don't just look at the IT or front of house, maybe, or I call it, so your CRMs and your student, if you're in higher ed, your student databases and so on and so forth, your ERP. Look at how that interacts with your OT side. Now, the way the industry has worked in OT is that there's very powerful equipment manufacturers, they're amazing companies, a lot of them were founded here in the United States, that because of not needing a unified data estate at the customer side, they've kept the data that's in their world, it's not in the customer world, but yet the passenger has the poor experience if the jet bridge isn't fixed. The surgery doesn't happen in the hospital if the operating theatre's not there. And the students are either too hot or too cold in a space if it's not working. So at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the entity providing the service. Or so if it's a Walmart and your lettuce isn't there, or they've had to throw out a whole bunch of fresh produce, that's not a good day. So it's the responsibility of the operating entity to make sure that the experience of the person interacting with your business is there. And so I think it's really important to have that mindset. The next question is, how do you bring the OT and the IT world together? And partners like Microsoft, and many of you work with Microsoft, have really thought this issue through. And one of the things that I'm really excited about seeing is not just AI for the generative AI side of the house where we're seeing insights, but actually AI being used in the ingestion of data, building the relationships. We call it the knowledge graph. So being able to build the relationships between the OT side of the house and the IT side of the house to create a unified data estate that is incredibly valuable, not just for the ROI we're talking about today, but also for the future of revenue opportunity and so much more that comes with having a unified data estate.
Well, I love that. That lead-in was exactly where I was going to go, because once you talk about the foundational element of data, the merging of all that data, the ability to gain insights and action off of it, it becomes valuable internally. But I love this concept. I want to explore a little bit more about data monetization within the industry to lift everybody within the industry, because whether it's DFW or any of the other customers you work with, all of that information is incredibly useful. And what we're seeing is a trend at Microsoft is AI has unlocked productivity and unlocked hard ROI with use cases. But as this data layer becomes more centralized and more useful, we are seeing outside of sort of the physical AI space, a lot of monetization opportunities where multiple industries, which is what's fascinating, and I'm very lucky to be able to see this across multiple industries, that data that would maybe in a shipping company or a financial services company would be valuable to a retailer. And thinking about the supply chain and the data associated with it in a linear format from raw materials, or actually should go backwards from demand and forecasting in a retailer to raw material creation for the manufacturer, but also maybe even in healthcare and life sciences, the circular data supply chain of information in a provider to a payer to a pharma company or med tech company. But like, what do you see when you think about operational data specifically, since that's the world you live in? What are the monetization opportunities that you can foresee in the future, and how are you guiding your customers on that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question.
And I love the one, we're going to stay on DFW, but I love the example, right?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about this, and DFW Airport, once you've got, let's just talk about Terminal D. In Terminal D, it's a pretty new terminal compared to some of the other ones that are getting refurbished and so on. But let's just talk about Terminal D. We've got a beautiful 3D model of Terminal D that was pushed through the construction, and then we've actually used laser scanning to get all the spaces within the entire terminal, for example. And having that spatial data, and then overlaying data that's coming in from FlightAware, which is the flights coming in and out, and then knowing in terms of space and occupancy, and then time of day, the type of volume of passengers and where they're sort of heat mapping around the terminal has been incredibly helpful for many use cases. We originally looked at it from particularly the maintenance and the energy consumption side, and that was the core of it. But to your point, as then the merchandising team started looking at this and saying, okay, well, what could we do with this? And Boston Consulting Group's been doing some great work in terms of road mapping this out, looking at the foundational data sets that we've been able to build out, and then how could this be relevant to other areas. And I know your background's in the retail side as well, Carlton, but many of the retailers that the concession groups that you've worked with, the Starbucks and the Pandas and so on, the vision is to be able to utilize that data to then be more precise on the type of conveyance, the type of concession group, or even negotiating leases based on volume, and then looking at the data to inform those decisions. So that's a small example of the many that come through. I think one of the challenges we see is, where do you start? And do you start on that revenue side, where you can sort of see where the biggest impact would be on the revenue? Another example in healthcare is, the classic water leak that happens that then knocks out the ability to charge, your customers basically for procedures for a period of time. That's not just a cost to fix. That's the also revenue opportunity. Similarly with bags, if there's a motor outage on a baggage handling unit, okay, the passenger doesn't know, but the airline wears the cost of not only the bag and the passenger's frustration, but it starts with an operational issue. But I think what we've learned through that is that start on the operations side, and then these other opportunities really open up in terms of vision and other. I think the challenge sometimes is doing too much too early, and then the CFO office saying, well, we're trying to do too much. Why are we spending all this time on this? Let's look at paying the bill first, and then building the future use cases.
Yeah, I love the whole democratization concept of data and, allowing, I mean, the data shouldn't be as proprietary as some companies think. And I guess personally, I have a mission for data to be able to, and AI to allow for, Chick-fil-A to have a smaller line so I can get through it at the airport or Starbucks. But maybe that's the holy grail we can chase together. But anyway, so let's, as we come down to wrap this session up, everyone sort of, I intend to go here with customer conversations. How do I get started? How do I think about deployment? How do I think about what this journey looks like? What expectations should I set? Speed, pace, breadth, number of use cases, things like that. I'll tell you that from a Microsoft perspective, what I think the maturity of AI over the past, say, 18 months since we really started double clicking on this. I think we were pretty scattered this time last year. We were all over the place chasing use cases and none of them really getting to scale. That's more of a Microsoft conversation, right? As we are partnering, all good ideas, all super high value, super high profile to the board or the C-suite. But now I think specifically as we are getting agents more broadly adopted, some industries more advanced than others. Financial services may be a little more advanced than, say, manufacturing or retail. I think our view of this is that we need to think about an AI platform, an agentic AI platform that is a layer that embeds all business processes and workflow. Think of it as not replacing, but enhancing, or even the breakthrough that ERP did 2 decades ago, as everything sort of centralized and connected all the functions outside of each of the silos into an integrated format. In our opinion, that's the way we think of how you should start that journey now. And so really outlining what is the true outcomes you're looking for and how do they all connect so that you're not ideating and also burning cycles on individual use cases in silos. And so easier said than done, but I'm sure there are a lot of companies out there that you can partner with. Microsoft obviously is a great one. Willow is as well. But when you first start having conversations with potential customers or customers that are looking to expand, what's the advice you give on how to get started, how to think about it, and how to set the proper expectations?
Yeah, another great question. Well, I've got some good examples across various sectors. I think find a technology partner, one of the big 3, I'd say, that you're already working with, and make sure you have a conversation at the CIO level to start with. I think it's very important to have leadership in terms of the data estate, because you can sort of look at this as a platform or a point solution. We've all been down the path of point solutions, and they feel good at the time, and we can get something up and running, but they don't scale. So I think the first thing is make sure you approach it from that leadership perspective and look at this as a platform. We heard yesterday about the various areas of steam, electricity, the information age, and AI. I think if you really think about that, let that sink in, and all those different eras that we've read in history books about, we're in it right now. So it's important to think about this, point 1, as a platform rather than a point solution. Point number 2 is, in my opinion, focus on early wins in areas that are high pain points for the enterprise. So we like to say, okay, energy is non-disputable because there's an energy bill that you paid last month, and then there's an energy bill you're paying next month. Let's look at what we can do to improve or decrease the cost of the consumption of energy, and let's start there, because that helps you internally justify the time and effort it will take to build a unified data estate. So find ROI that's a high pain point for the organization, that has strong evidence around it, that then earns you the right to build out a bigger vision. Thirdly, find a partner in addition to one of the big hyperscalers that solves the problem. Now, we're very focused on the operational side of the house, but there's amazing partners out there. And go deep with them, build that partnership model and align the vision. I often say we might be getting paid from a different employer, but we've got to be wearing the same t-shirt with the same vision. And I think that's super important, to build that partnership with the provider. They want to do well by you as an enterprise. And if you've got an aligned vision to achieve that, that's very, very important. And then the last thing is, operationalizing matters. And making sure that you're it's not just about delivering insights and data for data's sake, but finding areas where key decisions are being made that are being driven to action. I think you mentioned, Carlton, earlier on about catering for the whole sort of continuum of the workforce. In the world we're in, there's a retiring or population of frontline workers that have been doing this job in a certain way for 40 years or similar. There's a gentleman out at DFW that when there's a weather event, he gets booked into the Grand Hyatt Hotel because he's basically the human twin of the airport and understands everything that has to happen when there's a major snowstorm. Well, that person's going to retire soon, and then that same person is replicated in lots of different institutions. So enlisting their support, getting those folk, as point number 3, excited about this opportunity. How can they live on beyond their tenure at this particular institution? How can their knowledge be encoded into a data estate and into generative AI that allows younger folk to get attracted into these kind of jobs? My personal opinion about manufacturing in the United States and bringing a lot of the workers into that space, we cannot do it the same way we did it after World War II. It's just not going to happen. So we've got to look at new ways of attracting different types of workers and then motivating them and giving them the tools that enable them to do things at a lot faster rate. And then those that are experienced, how can we make sure that their knowledge is encoded? So I think those are the 3 key points.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I'll maybe put a bow on it from more of a macro perspective on setting expectations. I used that word a couple of times in the last description because I think it's super important. The challenge that we're finding, this is not about operational technology or AI or in a physical space, but just AI in general. The use cases and the value is landing in a different spot on the P&L than cloud migration. So I know we have cross-functional representation in the audience, so IT folks are probably very familiar with the cost analysis of moving a data center and VMs into a hyperscaler environment and what that math looked like, and was very easy to communicate to the CFO. Okay, look, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to get, and then here we go. We made it, and check the box. Job well done. Where I think we're struggling now, and I'm encouraging my teams to lean in more effectively with our customers, is all this AI is drummed up in the line of business, as you just mentioned, the excitement, enthusiasm. They're the closest to the action. They know the pain points, but the value lands with them. Let's say marketing. Marketing is increasing return on ad spend through AI, and that's massively significant to a company. But the bill gets sent to IT, and somehow we've got to start as an industry or as a full ecosystem reconciling that better, so that an IT professional, which many of you probably are, not sitting there going, my costs are going through the roof, as the CFO is saying, maintain flat or maybe decrease IT spend year over year, but the benefit to the company is massive. So I think that's collectively what we'll have to solve together in order to continue to accelerate into this next chapter and really see AI institutionalized at scale with every industry, every organization, and fulfill the promise that I think exists out there. So maybe we'll probably wrap with that, and we'll get to the most important part, which Josh is going to explain what we're doing for lunch. So here are your instructions.
The best part of the presentation, huh? So we've reached the midway point in our day. What a great conference it's been so far, by the way, meaning it's lunchtime. We've got box lunches for you to pick up outside the doors of this ballroom, so just outside here, and also down on level 3. So grab your lunch, nice lunches, by the way, I had one yesterday, and head down to level 3 for some of the table talks. If you haven't picked which table talk you'd like to attend, take a moment to explore the topics using the QR code on your badge or one of the digital kiosks placed around the venue. We have about 10 minutes before those table talks start. Staff from the Dallas Regional Chamber are available to help you find your way. And we'll reconvene here back at 1:30 for the remainder of today's session. Thank you very much.